Welcome to the Presbyterian Parallel event, Women Leading in the Church on Climate Justice. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sue Ream. I am the Presbyterian representative to the United Nations. Before we begin, there are just a couple of announcements. Today's webinar is available in both English and Spanish. We will provide simultaneous interpretation through the PCUSA Global Language Services. You should see a little globe icon in the bottom right-hand corner. Please select the language that you wish to hear, English or Spanish or original. One of our panelists, Yolanda Zurita, will be speaking in Spanish. If you're a native English speaker, we encourage you to go ahead and select the English option. Please make sure you have the latest version of Zoom and are using the Zoom app. Please feel free to use the chat function if you have questions. When we get to the time for questions and answers, you can submit questions using the Q&A button on your Zoom toolbar or submit it via chat. I will give you just a couple of seconds to get yourself oriented. And now, before we begin our formal program, I'd like to acknowledge with honor and gratitude the land and the indigenous peoples of the Munsee, Lenape, and Madagascar people who have stewarded these territories through many generations, where I now call home Flushing, Queens. We invite you to acknowledge your ancestral lands in the chat. Would you now join me in prayer before we begin our webinar? It's a prayer from the Book of Common Worship. And it goes, for the good world, for things great and small, beautiful and awesome, for seen and unseen splendors, for work to do and strength to work, for the comradeship of labor, for exchanges of good humor and encouragement, for the church into which we have been called, for the good news we receive by word and sacrament, for our life together in the Lord, we praise you, God. Amen. Again, welcome and thanks for joining us today. This webinar is being presented on the occasion of the 66th Commission on the Status of Women, the largest gathering on gender equality at the United Nations. This is the second year in which we are participating virtually with more than 40,000 people worldwide taking part. Our joint Presbyterian delegation is more than 50 women strong from Asia, Africa, and across the US. It is intergenerational from women in their 20s to 90s, meeting and sharing stories and learning from one another. The Presbyterian ministry at the United Nations has hosted a delegation of Presbyterians for some 2 decades. When Presbyterian Women received its own UN accreditation in 2018, we started bringing a joint Presbyterian delegation to CSW, and we are stronger for it. This year, the theme is Achieving Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment in the Context of Climate Change, Environmental, and Risk Reduction. While climate change is a universal threat, the burden is not felt equally across the world. It disproportionately impacts the health and livelihoods of the poor and most vulnerable, especially those who face multiple intersecting forms of discrimination, such as women in poverty, youth, children, people with disabilities, Indigenous peoples, and people of color. The increasing frequency and severity of climate-related and natural disasters is impacting climate-vulnerable communities and heightening environmental stressors. Oftentimes, women die at higher rates than men during disasters. Women's livelihoods are also at higher risk because they dominate the subsistence agriculture sector, especially in low-income countries. Food insecurity and lack of access to resources, especially following a disaster, disproportionately impact women, affecting health outcomes and economic resilience. And while women's experiences of climate change and their extensive knowledge and expertise in adaptation strategies make them effective actors and agents of change, women's voices are often not included in decision-making processes. This exclusion reinforces pre-existing inequalities and leads to less effective interventions. Women leaders in the church and faith-based organizations have and can play an important role in lifting and supporting the voices and perspectives of women in marginalized groups and communities by challenging heteropatriarchal attitudes and practices and furthering women's participation in addressing climate change. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator who will guide this important conversation. Jessica Maudlin. She serves as the Associate for Sustainable Living and Earth Care Concerns with the Presbyterian Hunger Program. In this role, she manages the Earth Care Congregation and Hunger Action Advocate networks, as well as resourcing Presbyterians as they address issues of faith, lifestyle choices, and sustainability. Jessica, please take it away.
Thank you, Sue, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you joining us, depending on where in the world you are. As Sue named, we know women's roles in addressing climate change is such an important piece that often is too often overlooked. And so we are so thankful today to have three really incredible, powerful leaders in climate change to join us for this conversation today. So we have with us the Reverend Dr. Nettie Astudillo, who is a Venezuelan-American and daughter of two Presbyterian pastors. She is an eco-theologian and a Presbyterian pastor herself who coordinates GreenFaith's outreach to Latin American faith communities and to the U.S. Latino faith community. We also have with us today Yolanda Zorrida, who is the coordinator of social pastoral care for the parish of La Arroya, Peru, which is considered to be one of the 10 most contaminated places in the world due to mining-related toxins and pollution. We also have with us today the Reverend Mamisu Rakotomalala, a pastor from the Church of Jesus Christ in Madagascar, which is a partner church of the Peace USA. She's currently a doctoral candidate at Columbia Theological Seminary in Atlanta, Georgia, where she is focusing on ecofeminism. I want to start our presentation by giving each of these powerful women an opportunity to introduce themselves to us. So if we could start with Nettie.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Sue. Blessings, sisters and brothers. It's a blessing to be with you today in this conversation. And yes, so Nettie Astudillo, as Jessica mentioned, Venezuelan, daughter of a Colombian mother and a Venezuelan father, both pastors, as he was mentioned too. Have been working on environmental justice and eco-theology issues since my early 20s. That's a little plus 30 years now. And this work led me to start, together with my husband, an educational center at an organic farm in the Midwest in the United States. And now I work for GreenFaith. So I look forward to sharing more. Thanks for being together today.
Wonderful, thank you. Yolanda?
Con la bendición de nuestro Señor, Dios de la vida, buen día con todos hermanos y hermanas. Bueno, pues yo soy Yolanda Zurita Trujillo, nacida en La Oroya, como decían, en las 10 ciudades más contaminadas del mundo. Soy trabajadora social y aparte de eso, soy la coordinadora de la pastoral social de la Vicaría Quinta del Arzobispado de Huancayo. Bueno, pues como agente pastoral estoy participando en un comité conservacionista de Villa El Sol en la zona donde radico, donde estamos realizando trabajos de recuperación vegetal a fin de poder contribuir a la solución de la problemática de la afectación a las personas y a nuestra madre naturaleza, ¿no? Asimismo, también participo en la plataforma por la salud ambiental Región Junín, donde hemos llegado a una propuesta de una ordenanza, y como ex coordinadora de la plataforma por la salud ambiental, perdón, por la plataforma nacional de afectados y afectadas por metales, metaloides y otras sustancias químicas tóxicas, ¿no? Que hemos llegado a poder construir un plan especial para la atención integral a personas afectadas por metales, metaloides y otras, con gusto para poder compartir este caminar.
Thank you so much for being with us, Yolanda. Mommy Sue?
Thank you, Jessica. It is a blessing to be here with you today. Mami Sue Rakotomalala. I am an ordained minister of the Church of Jesus Christ in Madagascar, short as FJKM. I served few congregations in northern Madagascar before my coming to the States in 2018, as I'm pursuing my doctorate degree in Christian education. I have started to work with women through my degree preparation in Madagascar and my 4 years as a senior pastor of a large and rural parish. I understand from these experiences how education is essential to challenge the oppressive structure through raising awareness, empowering women. And my research for the doctorate program that I'm doing is to equip women to face those patriarchal domination. The framework of feminist theology helps the Christian education to develop liberating practices for women flourishing. And as the women and earth experience is connected, feminist theology is helpful for Christian education to do so. I'm glad to be here for our learning together. Thank you.
Thank you all so much again. We are excited to learn from your wisdom and your experiences. And I would just remind our audience that you can put questions in the chat as we go along, so we can get to those at the end of our discussion. But I'd like to start first by asking Nettie if you could share with us a little bit about what eco-theology is and how that has shaped your faith and your work around climate change.
Well, yeah, when I think about this question, I need to also add that eco-theology has not just shaped my faith and work, but it has also shaped my life. And I'm sure here as well, Mami Sue and Yolanda's. When I look at my life, I think I need to begin recognizing that when I was a child, my parents both moved to Argentina from Venezuela to start theology, to study in seminary. And it was a time of political turmoil, repression, disappearance, when I, as a very young child, witnessed a church seeking to understand its role in the middle of the social crisis of the time. But the ocean and the countryside was the place where my parents and other students from the seminary would go for a break, for peace, for love, to really feel the love and security of God. And I think with me, unconsciously, that was my experience of being out in the natural world. That's where I learned peace and love and plenitude. So when my time as a young person we went back to Venezuela, I came to decide what I wanted to study in the university. I, as a woman raised in the church, in a seminary, living in the church, I really felt that I wanted to make the world a better place. Now also questions about why poverty and political turmoil and all that. And I wanted to understand the world so I could change it. So I decided that perhaps sociology was the best career for me to find the answers, to make the changes in the world that I so needed. And after 3 or 4 years of my studies in Venezuela, it's usually 4 to 5 years of studies, then the question for me was, okay, now I understand why, but now the question was where to begin. Had not planned to be a pastor myself yet at that time. And so the question, okay, where do I begin? And it was during that time of discernment as a young church leader. Of course, prayer was part of my discernment process. And I began to dream. I began to dream in the night that I was swimming under the water with dolphins. And again, was going back to those moments of plenitude and peace and love that I had experienced with my parents, but I yet had not really understood what they meant. However, those dreams allowed me to pay attention to the fact that in the newspapers in Venezuela, there were articles being written about the killing of dolphins by the shark and the tuna industries. At the time, Venezuela didn't have environmental laws that would protect neither traditional fishermen from the arrival of international boats that were coming and grabbing everything from very close to shore, or protecting us from what we did as a country was purchasing fishing fleets, tuna fishing fleets from the United States that were no longer being used in the United States because there were environmental laws here and prohibiting the killing of dolphins by the thousands. And not having those laws meant that Venezuela bought those fishing fleets, and we were then now causing the killing of thousands of dolphins in the Pacific. And in the Venezuelan coast, the reality was that this allowing international fleets coming to fish so close to shore was making that traditional fishermen could no longer fish enough to sustain their families, and now needed to buy bigger boats, bigger motors. And one of those ways of making more money much faster was selling shark fins. And the best way to catch the shark is using dolphins, because just like us human beings bleed a lot, and it's much easier to catch the sharks. So in that reality, I learned about a public forum where they were talking about the killing of dolphins in Venezuela, and I attended as a young university student. And as I was hearing the speakers, I had that, what we will call that conversion experiences, where you feel, this is it, Lord, send me, I want to work on these issues. And as I approached the speakers and told them, I'm a sociology student, I want to be a volunteer, I don't know too much, but I want to give my life to this. They told me that they had been waiting for a year looking for sociologists willing to work for them, that they had a job for me to please come the next day. So my life changed then, and it hasn't since. That has been my journey. And of course, as a young leader of the church at the time, what happened was that even though I wanted to bring these issues back into the church, there was no pastor talking about these issues. I realized that I also lacked the theological and biblical narratives and content to talk to people in the church, to raise awareness about environmental issues. That was just the beginning. I guess that's where I would say God again took me out of the shore and gave me an opportunity, which what I thought would be a temporary trip to the United States. And it was here that I found out that seminaries were already teaching about environmental justice, theology of creation, and that missing piece, that missing tool that I needed was being offered, and it was being recognized as part of the new ministry of the church. And therefore I understood that my experiences, it was a calling that God was giving me, and not just me, but the whole church. So that led me into seminary. And I guess is there where I understood, and now the definition of what is eco-theology is to understand that God as creator is calling God's people, and nature is speaking, to calling us to protect life, to protect the natural world, to protect vulnerable communities. As I can see now, the fishing communities wanting to maintain their culture, but being forced by industrial fisheries to adopt to other types of culture that are destructive to their own environment. So eco-theology wants to find answers to questions of, well, if God is a creator, why are we destroying God's creation? If we are made in God's image, what image of God are we reflecting? What is our role in creation? What is God's will for God's creation? And eco-theology finds answers to these questions, studying sacred writings, studying nature, studying human culture, the way we learn to know, you know, learning from science and learning from the history of the church to figure out where is that we need to also find correctives to bring the church back into this calling, a special calling of caring for the natural world, for what we call to be God's creation. So I'll leave it there and let my other sisters share as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nettie. That is such a powerful question. What image of God are we reflecting? That's a good question for us all. I would like to turn now to Yolanda and ask if she could share with us a little bit more of the context of her work in Peru and what challenges that she is seeing that women leading the struggle against the forces that are causing climate change, what those impacts are on the people of Peru.
Sí, bueno, pues escuchando a la hermana, justamente reflexionaba y decía, bueno, que el Señor justamente nos hace llamado a través de los gritos de dolor de nuestros hermanos, gritos de dolor de nuestra Pachamama. Creo que es un llamado a que justamente no hay vuelta que dar. Es justamente decir, no, ¿qué hago frente a esto? Bueno, pues la experiencia que yo tengo es que yo estaba estudiando en Huancayo y por una huelga de la universidad, de los profesores, regresé a La Oroya. Y total que de retorno a Huancayo empiezo a sufrir convulsiones y no sabía qué es lo que pasaba, por qué es lo que sufría las convulsiones, ¿no? No me daban un diagnóstico, la razón, el por qué. Y bueno, pues en pleno tratamiento observo que en el lugar, en un jirón le llamamos, ¿no? Donde vivían 11 familias, sufrían de convulsiones 4 mujeres, una hermana de 35 años más o menos, su hija de 11 años, otra adolescente de 15 años y mi persona. Y en pleno tratamiento escucho al doctor que decían que mi caso era más leve a comparación de las otras hermanas. Entonces, pero hasta eso yo no me imaginaba qué es lo que pasaba ni lo relacionaba. Bueno, pues tenía que retomar mi participación en la parroquia como agente pastoral, como laica comprometida, y siempre desde niño nosotros hemos participado por incentivo de mi mamá más que nada, ¿no? Y se presenta la oportunidad de poder escuchar a profesionales. Justamente el tema principal era sobre los efectos en la salud por el dióxido de azufre y el plomo. Inmediatamente lo relaciono con, ¿cómo se llama?, con lo que yo había sufrido, las convulsiones. Y lo rematan diciéndome que era irreversible esa afectación. Entonces, prácticamente el estudio, la profesión y todo eso se me viene abajo, ¿no? Y bueno, pues, ¿qué hacer frente a esto? ¿Qué hacer? Entonces, lo único era yo estoy sufriendo, he visto muchas personas sufriendo, pero esto debería ser algo para que otras personas no se afecten, prevenir a otras personas, ¿no? Y más que nada a las futuras generaciones. Empiezo un poquito más ya a detenerme a poder, ¿no? Y recién a profundizar la historia de La Oroya, ese sufrimiento de mis padres, de mis abuelos, donde ellos habían sufrido el impacto tan fuerte cuando empezó a funcionar el complejo metalúrgico, ver esas densas neblinas del humo, pero parecido a la ceniza que había cubierto 1 centímetro del suelo. Totalmente las plantaciones calcinados, muerte de la fauna, flora y todo eso, ¿no? Entonces empiezo a reflexionar, digo, Dios mío, ¿cómo fue esa agresión drástica a la madre naturaleza, esa madre naturaleza que Dios nos dio para poder administrarlo y administrarlo para las futuras generaciones, porque es la herencia de las futuras generaciones. Tantos años de agresión, tantos años desde 1922, agresión, y esto afectando seriamente a mis hermanos, afectando seriamente, ¿no? Y presenciar a un Estado, no puedo decir ausente, un Estado presente, pero que avalaba todas esas agresiones. Todas esas agresiones avalaba porque todas las leyes y todo eso giraba al interés y dando beneficio a quien nos estaba generando daño. En este caso al complejo metalúrgico y también a las mineras que están cerca a nuestra zona, ¿no? No había una preocupación por la salud, más por el contrario, yo siento y me indigna, era como una especie de ¿cómo se llama? Una burla, donde culpaba a la madre de familia el por qué su niño tenía plomo en su organismo. Culpaba, le hacía sentir culpable porque decía que esa madre no había enseñado los hábitos de higiene a ese niño y por la falta de hábitos de higiene, el niño tenía presencia de plomo en su organismo. ¿Y qué madre podía, podía denunciar? ¿Qué madre podría denunciar o decir mi hijo tiene esto? Justamente era una de las indignaciones y el otro hasta llegaban al extremo de decir que el plomo no hacía daño a la salud. Más por el contrario, que la persona que tenía plomo en su organismo era persona más inteligente, y por eso pues el oroíno era inteligente. ¿Y quién lo decía esto? Una persona de salud, un médico. Pero también era otra indignación que justamente porque ese médico cuando llegó a La Oroya, recuerdo muy bien, en una reunión dijo, no, a mí no me van a mentir, esta contaminación hace daño a la salud y denuncia todo eso. Qué bueno, alegría para nosotros, qué bueno, ¿no? Que pues tenemos un profesional ahora que va a defender, va a poner sobre agenda esto de la salud, ¿no? Y algo raro, al mes de estadía de menos de un mes, ya cambia su versión. Nos enteramos que estaba viviendo en las viviendas de la empresa, nos enteramos que estaba alimentándose en el comedor de la empresa. Y qué tristeza, qué indignación, muy fácilmente cambia, ¿no? Cambia y llega incluso hasta decir que la persona de La Oroya es inmune a la contaminación ambiental. Hubo momentos muy difíciles, porque hemos tenido amenazas de muerte, hemos tenido, ¿no? Pero gracias a la incidencia, a los ojos que estaban pendientes, a la iglesia presbiteriana a nivel de Estados Unidos, de Missouri, a la iglesia católica de donde yo pertenezco, gracias a ellos justamente quizá ahora estamos hablando libremente, ¿no? Pero no niego que yo ya había querido desistir, alejarme de esta lucha. Pero pues en un taller o un retiro espiritual que tenemos, me dicen, no, ya tienes abiertos los ojos, ya puedes denunciar, ya puedes anunciar y denunciar, ya tienes abiertos los oídos. Y bueno, pues ahora, ¿qué vas a hacer frente a esto? Si tú te callas, no denuncias, te haces a la ciega, hay pecado de omisión. ¿Cómo poder yo cometer ese pecado de omisión? Ese era uno que me animaba. El otro que me animaba es justamente la vida de Jesucristo. Jesús vino a este mundo justamente por las injusticias que había aquí, el pago de impuestos y todo lo demás. Y bueno, pues también los grandes intereses crucificaron a nuestro Señor, ¿no? Crucificaron. Entonces, justamente eso es lo que me enseñaba y decía, ¿no? Si Jesucristo, siendo hijo, Dios hecho hombre, entregó su vida por las injusticias, yo que soy pecadora, ¿por qué no puedo entregar mi vida, no? Y es por eso que me animaba y hasta estos momentos, ¿no? Y en los momentos de soledad también cogía el ejemplo de Jesucristo, ¿no? No hubo un Pedro que le negó, no hubo un Judas que le traicionó. En el momento difícil, ¿quién únicamente estaba? Su madre, la única que le acompañaba, que estaba hasta los momentos difíciles, ¿no? Entonces, pues nosotros, ¿por qué no? ¿Por qué no pasar esos momentos difíciles, no? Y bueno, pues tenía que profundizar bastante esto de la doctrina social de la iglesia, donde nos hablaban del hijo que tiene, el hombre tiene dignidad, porque es hijo de Dios Padre. Pasar a la otra orilla, justamente acompañar a nuestros hermanos que estaban sufriendo, y por último pasar de la protesta a la propuesta, ¿no? Porque justamente pues decíamos, si nosotros tenemos que buscar encaminado, iluminado con la paz, es como nosotros pasamos. Y es justamente por eso que, ¿cómo se llama? Juntamente con la Plataforma por la Salud Ambiental y Humana, proponemos y levantamos una ordenanza donde justamente se pide, ¿no?, la atención integral para las personas afectadas por metales, metaloides y otras sustancias químicas tóxicas. Pero lastimosamente son bien hábiles las autoridades. Sí, pues nos dieron la ordenanza, pero no presupuestaron ni nada de eso. Esto nos sirvió justamente ya en la plataforma nacional. Hemos trabajado bastante estableciendo ese diálogo horizontal, porque nosotros, nuestra enseñanza, nuestra vivencia, tiene valor científico, tanto así como de los profesionales. Entonces, juntamente se elaboró el Plan Especial Nacional para la atención a personas afectadas por metales, metaloides y otras sustancias químicas tóxicas, pensando ya en la afectación del sector minero, hidrocarburos, todo en forma completa, ¿no? Para no estar, dejando de lado a nuestros hermanos más sufrientes, que son los hermanos que no tienen alimento, que no tienen vivienda, los que no tienen acceso a la salud. Ellos son los hermanos más sufrientes, y justamente a estar al llamado de nuestros hermanos. Muchísimas gracias.
We are so thankful that you chose to continue to use your voice to speak up for the folks in La Arroya, and we're thankful for you shared your experience with us here. Mami Sue, we would love to hear about the impacts of climate change in your home of Madagascar, and to hear more about what ecofeminism is and the role that education that you referenced earlier can play in empowering women to lead in the context of working to protect creation.
Thank you, Jessica. We have a saying in Madagascar, in my language, which says, Smala Nyala Atsinanan, which I can translate it as, the eastern forest will not perish, as it is really full and green. But this is not true anymore, unfortunately, because this green forest that we as Malagasy people are proud of starts to lessen. The south of Madagascar suffers from droughts, high temperatures, inconsistent rainfall, the land dries, the crops are damaged. The south faces tremendous famine and malnutrition. Most of the households do not have access to clean water, drinking water. They must buy from outside sources at a costly rate that many cannot afford. People must walk for a long distance to find water. And recently, 3 cyclones hit Madagascar, the southeast and east coast. Displacement has increased due to that, because people strive to better access to food and livelihood opportunities. So like the worldwide countries, Madagascar faces the impacts of climate change. Adding to climate change, people also face the economic impact of COVID-19. My church, the Church of Jesus Christ in Madagascar, or FJKM, implemented strategies to face the issues. FJKM responds to climate change by promoting Green Church program, training seminarians, pastors, and volunteers to plant trees and grow fruits through the Fruit, Vegetables, and Environment Education program, which FJKM partners with PCUSA through their missionary working in Madagascar. FJKM also helps the community to develop animal husbandry by providing funds, also help the community to distribute seeds for planting and constructing wells. But with this ecological and economic injustice to social norms like patriarchy is overlooked. In Madagascar, early arranged marriages are part of the norms, the social norms, that it's become like the everyday life of people. Women are silent and the men are at the decision making. An article about Madagascar recently reported, and I quote, "Madagascar is reeling from a double catastrophe, crop failure in the south, partly due to climate change and the COVID-19 induced economic crunch. Some families are so desperate, so they are selling their daughters because of hunger. The poorest families want to get rid of their daughters. So a man of 60 who may already have 4 or 5 wives can get a 12-year-old in marriage. Many children are dropping out of school to work or forage to get food, and gender violence has increased. So climate change impacts the household, brings dysfunction in the family, and women and girls are at the intersection of these many oppressive forces. Women oppression and Mother Earth oppression are interconnected. And this is where ecofeminism is helpful. Ecofeminism is a branch of feminism that studies the intersection between gender inequity and nature degradation. Ecofeminism challenges social and environmental injustices. The Catholic ecofeminist theologian, Dr. Nantando Adibe, stated, and I quote her work for ecofeminism. She said, "Ecofeminism argues that the root of ecological crisis is social injustice, but that the group most affected are women, so that the cry of the earth is the cry of women." Women and nature are affected by patriarchal social systems that intersect with racism, classism, and sexism. And I would add to her quote that for many countries in sub-Saharan, like Madagascar, we must pay attention to colonization, the continuing of colonization, imperialism, which is another authority that is mislooked. This systematic oppression constructs a hierarchy, a pyramid that puts men in control and pushes women and the rest of the creation at the bottom. Gender and ecological justice necessitate education that fosters relationship and resists the various oppression that dehumanizes women and harms the earth. So I see the work of ecofeminism collaborating with religious education. Particularly for me, my interests align with Christian education. I'm suggesting a model of ecofeminist theology based on the oneness and interconnectedness of the body of Christ, the church, as a foundation of Christian education. Incorporating this model of ecofeminist theology into Christian education aims to deconstruct the hierarchical norms that perpetuate gender inequity and deteriorate nature. But this also reconstructs a stewardship model that ministers to all creation. So the concept of oneness and interconnectedness supports that the body of Christ, that the body does not exist separately, The different parts of the body do not constitute a body if they are apart. The various members form one. Each member is interconnected. And there is no hierarchy, there is no pyramid, there is a relationship in this circle of nature and human being and all the creation. The concept of oneness and interconnectedness sustains a new stewardship model in the body of Christ. As the church, we intentionally and relentlessly care to one another. A new stewardship model to underline the relationship of love and care among all creation. This new stewardship underlines the relationship of love and care, but also the stewards to each other. We stewards of each other. This circle of relationship consider individual, but also communal, the community of God creation. It provides opportunity for all, lifting voices of those who are silent, storytelling, lived experience of women and girls in the community, in the villages are essential. Honoring each gift, empowering each member, identifying one's role and accountability to one another. This circle of relationship is a relationship of king in the kingdom, and I insist here, kingdom, K-I-N/D-O-M of God, that promotes and for all to flourish. And I'm saying all human beings, but also nature, all the creation of God. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All of what you have had to share during this time has been a challenge as well as inspiring, and a question that I would like to open up to any of our presenters. You've all touched on this theme of how we're connected, and so that really that puts responsibility on us, right? So I would love to hear any suggestions that you would have for us about how people in churches, people in pews can take meaningful action to help prevent climate change, or to speak to how we can inspire people of faith to take action to address some of the things we've heard you name here. So I will open it up to whoever would like to jump in first to speak to that. We'd love to hear from you.
I can start. When we think about meaningful action to prevent climate change, one of the things that comes to mind for me is that there are parts of the world that are not causing the climate crisis as we know it today, but are taking great and courageous measures to address the climate crisis and supporting their communities. And there are other parts of the world that are the most responsible for the crisis, countries in the north, like the one I live in the United States. And we are responsible for 25% of the carbon emissions that are already in the atmosphere today, causing the symptoms of climate change as are already affecting communities, as Mamisu has also just shared. So we here in the United States, we need to be courageous and take drastic measures and mindful of our debt to the rest of the world, because it is greater than anyone else's. And the reality is that we're not doing enough for the size of our debt that we have with the world. I think we need to change our culture, our values of what a good life is. The so-called American dream in reality is a nightmare for the rest of the world. We need to reconsider our value of freedom. It's not freedom to have and want everything that we want at any time we want it, just because we have the financial power to do so, but it's really freedom to love, freedom to know the world, to love the world, and to be in connection, in relationship with our sisters and brothers around the world and in our own communities. I'd like a quote from Cynthia Moelovera that says that climate change may be the most far-reaching manifestation of white privilege and class privilege yet to face humankind. climate change is caused overwhelmingly by the world's high-consuming people who are disproportionately descendants of Europe. So this is a challenge for us living in the United States. And for me as an immigrant to the United States, it's also a challenge to realize that, of course, I came here to find the tools to work on this, but then also realize that I came to this country, and then this is one of the countries that have caused the worst environmental issues in the world, including my own country, right? We were selling shark fins to the US and some other Asian markets, right? We were buying these ships that were causing trouble because we didn't have enough environmental laws to protect our own land. And so work needs to be done in both places. But now that I'm here, there's a lot of education about how our lifestyles impact climate and the environment, you know, from what we eat, so how we transport ourselves, to our own way of using energy. So I guess one important call is to really be aware of our world, or the impact of our lifestyles, and getting to know how our own neighborhood, our own bioregion are being affected by climate change. And from there, connecting with the global story, right, that we are so connected with, not just because we're part of the planet, but because of this global market that is really connecting us, but in the wrong way, to the rest of the world. So trying to fix that in our own daily lifestyles, our own daily choices, because right there we have some power to affect change, and trusting that in that discernment process and work, we would create space for love and for healing and relationships. And so I'll leave it there and maybe bring out some other issues, ideas later.
I can add here, raising more awareness and...
No sé si me permiten sobre esta pregunta. Ay, disculpe, sí, adelante.
Go ahead, Yolanda. Okay. All right, so I said raising more awareness and accountability of we are stewards of each other. I'm looking at the image that we are all sitting on the same table. No one is outside. We are in this round table. So we lift the voices, and there is this metaphor. We pass the mic to those who don't have voice, because sometimes we tend to keep the mic for ourselves, but passing the mic to those who are silent, especially women and girls, indigenous people, who are in the villages. And I would like to quote also Wangari Maathai, when she talked about climate change. She said, climate change is forcing all of us, rich and poor, to acknowledge that we have reached a point in the evolution of this planet where our needs and wants are outstripping the ability of the earth to provide. And that some of us will have to do with less, with those who have very little are going to have enough to survive. It may require a conscious act of some of us saying no, in adding to finding other, less destructive ways to say yes. And I will add here, women and girls and the nature need to move from survival to flourishing. It's not just surviving, they need to flourish, women and girls and nature. Thank you.
Yolanda?
Sí. Sí, es muy importante justamente esto, ¿no? ¿Qué es lo que podemos proponer frente a esto, ¿no? Teniendo en cuenta que la problemática del cambio climático es la responsabilidad de todos, pero esta responsabilidad es de diferentes niveles de responsabilidad, ¿no? Entonces, considerando el mayor nivel de que están agravando la situación del cambio climático, pienso que podría ser realizar acciones de incidencia a fin que estos grandes responsables asuman su responsabilidad o cómo frenar esta actitud agresiva en contra de nuestra madre naturaleza, de nuestra Pachamama, de las personas y eso, ¿no? Sería uno de los puntos. El otro punto creo que es cómo podríamos nosotros solidarizarnos, apoyar a los grandes proyectos que se tiene, por ejemplo, en el caso de la zona donde yo vivo, estamos con ese proyecto de recuperación vegetal. Ya estamos por 23 hectáreas tratando de recuperar, es lento, pero lastimosamente en este proyecto hemos iniciado sin ningún apoyo, voluntariamente, aunque estos últimos 2 años o 3 años, no recuerdo exactamente, sí hemos tenido apoyo de los hermanos de la Red Uniendo Manos, dentro de eso los hermanos de la Iglesia Presbiteriana, ¿no? Y por cierto, también ellos nos han visitado y conocen la experiencia de trabajo. En el otro aspecto sería como un acompañamiento a las defensoras de esta afectación, ¿no? Sí, si bien es cierto, la mayoría no tenemos voz, pero justamente una de nuestra labor pastoral es darle voz a quienes no tienen voz, a quien pueda justamente ya teniendo la voz puede denunciar, puede anunciar, etcétera, etcétera, pero es bien difícil darle la voz y dejarlo de lado a la persona, ¿no? A la persona, a quien está la defensora en este caso, ¿no? Entonces yo pienso cómo armar un programa de acompañamiento espiritual, acompañamiento, ¿cómo se llama? Psicológico, social, acompañamiento de incidencia, a fin de poder darle la seguridad, el fortalecimiento a que esta lideresa, esta activista puede continuar con ¿no? Y así podrían surgir varios defensores más, ¿no? Podría decir. Y el otro es justamente la vigilancia a través de las diferentes incidencias de la Comisión, por ejemplo, de las Naciones Unidas, esa incidencia desde donde les compete, ¿cómo se llama? Hacer a que el Estado cumpla con sus responsabilidades, por ejemplo, en este caso a nivel del Perú, que ya se implemente este plan especial para la atención de personas afectadas por metales, metaloides y otras sustancias químicas tóxicas, porque sabemos muy bien que el Estado son muy buenos de poder firmar, de dar estos planes, eso, y después hacerse a los desentendidos, que pase el tiempo y se va al sueño de los justos, ¿no? Entonces, ¿cómo podríamos hacer para que se pueda dar esto, ¿no? Y el otro es cómo fortalecemos la solidaridad, ¿cómo se llama? A través de justamente de los países pobres en vías de desarrollo, si quiere decir, y los países que justamente que están representando ustedes, ¿no? Esa solidaridad, ese colectivo o esa plataforma, si se quiere decir, ayudaría bastante en este caminar, porque nuestra mirada justamente es construir, hacer algo frente a la afectación agresiva del cambio climático y de repente para un poquito, ¿no? Sensibilizar o la expresión de un campesino, de un poblador, donde manifestaba: el cielo ya no me quiere hablar. El cielo ya no me quiere comunicar. Antes el cielo me decía que va a llover y yo empezaba a sembrar mi chacrita. Antes el cielo me decía va a caer nevada y yo ya podía prever. Va a empezar las heladas, ya yo cuidaba mi chacrita, pero ahora el cielo está tan resentido que ya no me avisa qué es lo que tengo que hacer. Pero con una tristeza profunda que creo que sería la lucecita que nos ayudaría justamente para este caminar. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you all. Thank you all three of you for sharing. And three of the things I heard you name that jump out is the, solidarity and looking at our personal choices and how we help women flourish as well as the earth. As Presbyterians, we are really thankful that we have so many resources and offices that can help support us. So I just wanted to put up on the screen for folks participating just a few of the ways that you can engage these issues within the denomination. The Hunger Program offers lots of resources that help people think through what we heard Nettie name about our personal choices. Also, there are ways to connect through corporate engagement, through advocacy opportunities at our national level, through the Office of Public Witness, and we can also connect to the Presbyterian ministry at the United Nations that we have. Each of these offices also offer great resources that can be used in congregations that will be helpful to help us as people of faith work towards some of these things we've heard our leaders name today. So I will, at this point, for a last opportunity, want to thank again our panelists for taking the time to be with us. Thank you to the audience for spending this part of your day with us to hear from these powerful women leaders, and to thank the ministry at the United Nations for gathering us all together during the Commission on the Status of Women this week. So I will give it back to you, Sue.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this absolutely special, powerful conversation that we've been so privileged to hear and to share. Thank you so much, Nettie, Yolanda, Mama Sue, and thanks to Jessica for guiding this conversation so that we can learn and benefit from your knowledge and wisdom and experience. And to be able to do this as women of faith, thank you for your call and moving from protest to proposal, as Yolanda mentioned. Thanks for your stories that inspire us and younger generations, and to really understand it theologically so that it's embedded deep in us as we continue this work, to think about it in relationships, not in hierarchy or patriarchy, but really supporting one another. And I think women are pretty good at doing that, the CSW is any indication, and really giving us the courage and to share in the struggles of the people who are voiceless and giving voice to them. So I would just say I've been so privileged to hear you and to know that knowledge is power that can lead to change, and we can all be the agents of change. At this time, I did want to lift up the voice of our siblings in the small island nations that are suffering tremendously from climate change with the sea level rise, excuse me, whose homes are disappearing. They're dealing with loss and damage and having to move to higher ground. One of our PCUSA partners from the Pacific Conference of Churches in Fiji has sent us a video presentation, which we'll share on our Facebook page. So please go to it and tune in. And lastly, I would just like to thank our planning team, Ivy, Leah, Eileen, Courtney, Jessica, and Jed for preparing this wonderful webinar, and for the panelists. I hope the audience that you are inspired by these women and equipped to address climate change. And I just want to make a plug for the next event that's coming up, Virtual Ecumenical Advocacy Days, which is going to be held on April 25th to the 27th to restore, protect, expand voting rights in the US and to realize human rights around the world. So we hope some of you will join us for that, and to join us next year for CSW 67. And I just want to say a final thank you to all of you, and thank you for joining us today. Bye-bye.